The studio smelled like cigarette smoke and old carpet. It was 1972, and the music business still ran on handshakes and instinct. No emails, no contracts forwarded in seconds. Just rooms full of people who believed they understood each other, and more importantly, believed the other person understood them back. Jeff Beck was not there to make history that day. He was there to work. He had an album to finish, ideas to test, sounds to chase. That was the kind of man he was, always chasing something just slightly beyond what he'd already found. Stevie Wonder was in the building too. Nobody planned that exactly. It just happened the way things happened in Los Angeles in those years. Someone knew someone, a session ran long, a door stayed open. Wonder had been working on his own material. Beck had been working on his. At some point, the rooms connected. Wonder sat down at the drum kit. This was not unusual for him. He played everything. He heard everything. Music existed in his body the way language exists in other people. Not as something learned, but as something native. You didn't watch Stevie Wonder figure out an instrument. You watched him arrive at one. Beck stood nearby and watched. Wonder started playing. Nothing formal, nothing with a name yet. Just a pattern that repeated, shifted slightly, and then repeated again. A rhythm that had weight to it, that pushed forward without hurrying. That felt inevitable in the way only the best rhythms do, like it had always existed somewhere, and someone had simply found the frequency. Beck didn't say anything, but people in that room later described the moment he stopped moving, the way someone freezes when they hear something they recognize. Not because they've heard it before, but because some part of them has been waiting for it without knowing what they were waiting for. The rhythm kept going. It had a groove that felt almost mechanical, but wasn't. There was something human buried inside it, an urgency, a low-level tension that never fully resolved. Wonder played it over and over, not performing, not showing off, just thinking out loud with his hands, finding where the edges were, seeing how far it could go before it broke. It didn't break. Beck picked up his guitar. He didn't ask permission. He didn't announce anything. He just found the key and stepped in. Within a few minutes, the two of them were building something together in that room. Something that hadn't existed an hour earlier and would never quite stop existing after. Later, no one could agree on exactly how long they played. It might have been 30 minutes. It might have been longer. Time does that in good studios. It becomes unreliable, soft at the edges. You look up and the light through the window has changed without you noticing. When they stopped, the room was quiet in a particular way. Not the empty quiet of a room where nothing happened. The other kind. The quiet that settles in after something real, when everyone present is still processing what they just heard, and nobody wants to be the first one to say something ordinary. Beck said the song should go on his album. He had an album in progress. A new group he was building. Beck, Bogert, and Apis. The track would fit. It was the kind of thing his audience would understand and lean into. He could hear where it was going. Wonder agreed. It wasn't a long conversation. Most important agreements aren't. There were no lawyers present, no written terms, no signatures on anything. Just two musicians in a room and a shared understanding of who had what and where it was going. Beck left the studio that day with something he hadn't arrived with. The weeks that followed were ordinary, in the way that the weeks before something goes wrong usually are. Beck continued working on the album. The track took shape slowly, the way good things do, not all at once, but in layers. He had the rhythm section now, and he was building around it, testing arrangements, listening for the space where the song could breathe without losing the tension underneath. He thought about the opening. He thought about the ending. He thought about what the song needed from him to become what it was supposed to be. He didn't think about what could go wrong. Most people don't. That's not carelessness. It's just that when something feels settled, you treat it as settled. You move forward. You build on the foundation without checking whether it's still there. The call came from Motown, not to Beck exactly, but into the situation, into the agreement. Motown had priorities and schedules and release calendars, and Stevie Wonder was one of their artists, and this track was something. You didn't need to be a genius to hear it. You just needed to listen once. What happened in the business conversations that followed, Beck was not fully part of. That is perhaps the most important detail in this entire story. Not the music, not the handshake. The fact that decisions were being made in offices by people who were not in the studio when the rhythm was born. People who looked at the track and saw something with commercial potential. And commercial potential had its own logic. And that logic didn't pause to ask who found the sound first. By November 1972, Talking Book was ready for release. Superstition was on it. Beck heard it on the radio. He was in a car or a room. The exact setting shifts slightly depending on who tells the story, and by now the story has been told enough times that the details have softened. But the one thing that doesn't change across versions is this. He heard it before anyone warned him. The opening, that pattern, 4 seconds of drum beat and keyboard stab that, by the end of that year, almost everyone in America would recognize immediately. And then Stevie Wonder's voice. Beck didn't say anything, according to the people who were with him. He just listened. All the way through. Past the groove, past the hook, past the outro, until the song ended and the radio moved on to something else as if nothing had happened. When it was over, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something short, something the people there remembered but didn't repeat exactly in interviews, because it wasn't a speech. It was just a man reacting to something cold moving through him. The specific chill of watching something you built get picked up and carried somewhere you didn't choose. He didn't sue. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't give an interview laying out the timeline, listing the facts, making his case to the public one careful sentence at a time. That was not the kind of man Jeff Beck was. What he did was quieter and in some ways harder. He finished the album. Beck, Bogert, and Appice was released in 1973. Superstition was on it. His version, the one he'd been building in the months between that session and the moment the other version landed on the radio. He recorded it anyway. He released it anyway. He didn't pretend it hadn't happened, and he didn't walk away from it. But by then, Stevie Wonder's version had already been #1. It had already won a Grammy. It had already become one of the most recognized opening riffs in the history of recorded music. Beck's version came out into a world that had already decided where the song lived. He played it anyway. The thing about losing a song is that you don't lose the memory of making it. Beck still had that. The room, the drum kit, the moment the pattern started and something in his body responded before his brain caught up. The way it felt to step in with his guitar and have it fit immediately, naturally, like it had been waiting for him. That moment was still his, and no release date could reach back and take it. But recognition is a strange currency. It moves toward the version people hear first, and people had heard the other version. On the radio, on television, in stores, in cars, at parties, everywhere. The story of Superstition had already been written by the time Beck's version arrived, and his name appeared in it as a footnote rather than the opening line. He went on tour. He made other records. He played the song when asked, which he sometimes was, and when he did, he played it the way he played everything, like someone who understood where it came from and wasn't asking anyone's permission to be there. Years passed. Stevie Wonder gave a lot of interviews across those years. He was that kind of artist. Open, willing to revisit the past, honest about the things that sat heavy. And eventually, in more than one conversation, the Superstition story came up. Wonder acknowledged what had happened, not defensively, not with a long explanation about label decisions and contractual obligations and things beyond his control. He said simply and directly that Beck should have had the song first, that the original agreement between them was real and was meant to be honored, that Motown moved in a direction Beck wasn't given proper notice of, and that this was something Wonder carried. He said it more than once, across more than one decade. Beck, when asked about it in interviews over the years, gave short answers. He was not a man who expanded into grievance. It was a long time ago, he said once. Stevie's a genius, he said in another context, and left the sentence there, without a but attached to the end of it. He didn't open the door wider than that. For people who knew him, that was its own kind of answer. Here is what didn't change. When you hear Superstition, the opening 4 seconds before the vocals, before anything else resolves, there is a rhythm that lands somewhere in the chest. It has a physical quality. It arrives before you've decided how you feel about it. That rhythm came from a session Jeff Beck was part of. It came from a room where two musicians were doing what musicians do when they're left alone with instruments and time, following something without knowing where it leads, playing past the point of thinking, finding the thing underneath the thing. Whether the song belongs to Beck, or to Wonder, or to Motown, or to the afternoon it was born in, is a question the music industry answered one way, and history kept complicating in another. But the rhythm never cared about any of that. It was already doing what it was always going to do. Jeff Beck died in January 2023. The tributes came immediately and from everywhere. He was the guitarist's guitarist, people said, the one the other ones listened to, the one who never quite fit into a single category because he kept moving before any category could close around him. Stevie Wonder posted a tribute too. It was brief. It named Beck directly. And it said, among other things, that there was a debt Wonder felt he had never fully repaid. Not in the way you repay money, but in the way you repay the kind of thing that doesn't have a number attached to it. The kind that just stays. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Some things sit better in the space between words than they do inside them. And some stories don't end with a verdict. They just end with the music still playing, in elevators and commercials, in the back of someone's memory. And somewhere underneath it all, a rhythm that started in a room in Los Angeles in 1972, when nobody was keeping score yet. Beck heard it on the radio. He listened all the way through. Then he went back to work. That's the whole story. And somehow that's enough.